Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. Today on the podcast, I have invited Alisha Grogan to come talk to us about activities that you can do, really simple activities that you can do to help your kids be calmer and more regulated. Alisha is an occupational therapist, and she specializes in helping kids who have sensory processing disorders, ADHD, autism, and also just kids who feel overwhelmed and struggle with maintaining their emotional regulation, their sensory regulation. And in this episode, we talk about sort of what the sensory inputs are and what are the clues that your child might be struggling with those inputs, and then a bunch of strategies and ideas of how to help your child re-regulate and also preset their nervous system in times of transition. So if you're struggling with getting your kids to come sit at the table, clean up toys, get in the bathtub, get to bed, get up in the morning, get out of the bed, get their shoes on, all of those normal, difficult times in a day where you kind of need to get your kids to do the next thing, we go through and talk about a bunch of ideas to support your kids to make those transitions easier. I can't wait for you to meet Alisha, and then also please check out her website, which is called Your Kids Table, and get access to her downloadable and all of the resources that are on her website. We go through and talk about some of the things that she has in her free downloadable, which is called Sensory Essentials. So I highly recommend you go pop over, get a copy of that, and then dive into this episode, or you can do it afterwards too. So I hope you enjoy meeting Alisha. Well, it's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good. I'm excited. I wanted to just jump right in because sometimes I notice that in the pre-record, there's like good stuff. And then I'm like, well, that's annoying because then we have to like say it over again. So I'll just jump right in. Yeah. Welcome to Become a Calm Mama podcast.
Same.
Alisha Grogan. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce you and have you introduce yourself, but I wanted to say how I found you. And it was through Instagram as a suggested for you because I'm a parenting coach. I don't have little kids, but I get a lot of like suggestions, and a lot of times I ignore them, to be honest. But something intrigued me about your sensory activities. And I was like, this is something that comes up with my clients all the time is they want to know how to help their kids regulate their nervous system. And I teach a lot of compassionate parenting tools, how to calm ourselves, and then how to calm our kids. And what I noticed is that they have a lot of trouble figuring out, once I validated the feeling, what do I do to help my kid work through that emotion or work through that overwhelm. And I got your little freebie, the sensory essentials, and I just loved it. I was like, I have to have you on the podcast. So that's how I found you. And yeah, that's why you're here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I can talk about sensory for days, so I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it's so great. So introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then we're going to get into like what it is, what sensory, like a sensory behavior overwhelm is, and what are some strategies to cope with that. And it'd be really practical. But first, let's start with like your story. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I am a pediatric occupational therapist for 20 years, which is kind of crazy now. I am also a mom of three kids myself that are now 10 to 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Interestingly, my kids have given me a full range of personal experience now as well. So one of my kiddos has ADHD. Uh, Two of my kids have had anxiety diagnoses. Although we're in a really good place right now, we have walked through some really hard times. And I have been online forever. It's like 2012. I am an OG blogger and yes, am very active on Instagram now. That is kind of our primary way of reaching folks these days with talking about sensory processing, picky eating, retain primitive reflexes. All this stuff actually can really go together. And emotional regulation, executive functioning skills, all of these things that I really specialize in as an OT.
Say
So,
what an OT is, because not everybody knows.
yes, I'm so glad you said that. So, OT is an occupational therapist, and occupational therapists work with all ages and all types of abilities. So, if you've ever been in rehab because you had an injury, you may have worked with an OT. Uh, Kind of similar to a physical therapist, they tend to work on the upper half of the body. As occupational therapists work with children, there's lots of different specialties that they can go into. So it could be feeding difficulties, is what we would call them, but it's again really severe picky eating, kids having a hard time chewing or swallowing their food. It's basically anything that affects daily life. Occupation is such a weird word, and they created this profession in the early 1900s, but occupation means daily activity. So that's where occupational therapy comes from. So it's like your daily activity therapist. So
Yeah.
anything that's kind of coming up in your daily activities, occupational therapists are really trained to help. And then there's, different specialties. So my specialties have become sensory processing and picky eating, just because early in my career, that's who most of the kids on my caseload were. And so I had
Yeah.
to be good at helping them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, the picky eating stuff you have on the resources you have on your website are so good. And like, there's a whole world. There's so much good stuff. And I wanted to have you back to talk about picky eating. I've talked about it a lot of times on the podcast because I have a kid who has a sensory processing disorder, and it really showed up as ARFID, which is that avoidant food restrictive intake disorder. Pretty severe. And we did OT and things like that. It's just been a long journey. He's 19 now, and he just has disordered eating at this point, but he is open to eating some new foods. So I can really relate to the struggle of that and how hard it is to, overcome when you have that. He also had sensory issues with clothing and all the things.
Yeah.
I remember him getting a fever, and he was like just screaming, sticky, sticky, sticky. He's like maybe 7. And I'm like, what is sticky in his hands? Because he was sweating. It just, any time of sensory input, like the rainy day at school, a strange smell. I mean, he was pretty, intense.
Yeah.
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 And then my other kid has pretty severe ADHD. And so I was always, as a lay practitioner, working towards, I just come up with stuff, like random stuff, like, hey, let's just, compression. I'm going to do a baby burrito or, a Sawyer sandwich or whatever. And, and like we would do little games with like pound your feet 5 times, jump up and down, all these different activities. Because I was just trying to figure out how to get them back in their body and calm them. And now I'm like, oh, this is all sensory activities.
It is. And clearly you were following your instincts, which is huge. And those were, I'm sure, immensely beneficial for your kid.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one morning my son was like, he looked to me to be a disaster on his way to like first grade. And I was friends with a teacher, and he was like laying on the floor in the morning with a blanket over his head and just kind of like a puddle. And I sent a photo to her, and I was like, good luck today. I don't know what I am bringing to school. And then she said, well, that whatever that was great, because he was super great all day and seemed really calm. And I realized, oh, it was like he was able to really take care of his nervous system in the morning and have that blanket and have that darkness for a bit and be in that like small positioning. And he really kind of was in his body enough and calmed himself. You probably know more of like what happened in the brain. But then he went to school and he was like better. And I was like, oh, this is a clue to me that this is how this kid needs to kind of preset
Right.
his nervous system or his dysregulation or whatever, like just his sensory input, so that he can then go in and take in a lot of new information. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like that, like a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, that's awesome though. You were connecting the dots, and you're right. You regulated his system. And so often what is happening is our kids that are neurodivergent, uh, and really my definition is not an official medical term. It's a kind of like a buzzword right now, and for good reason. I think that there's just such a push to awareness of, look, like we cannot compare all kids to some like golden norm, when we really need to acknowledge that uh, some kids, adults, have unique brain wiring that is causing this is what is causing these sensory sensitivities, causing the brain to work or function in a different way than what we might consider quote unquote normal or typical. And that, for me, that's first an awareness and an acknowledgement of, wow, my kid isn't bad. They're not trying to give me a hard time. I'm not
They're not
failing.
being manipulative. That's what I hear a
Right.
lot in my practice. Parents will say, they're manipulating me. And it's like, well, they're manipulating the environment to get their needs met. They're manipulating their own uh, way of communicate. Like it's a form of communication of some sort of dysregulation or unmet need. It's not that they are like, okay, say they are manipulating you. Manipulate for what purpose? To become calm, to get the support they need. And they are thinking, oh, maybe not even thinking, but like, this is the best way, best strategy I have right now to get my need met. And as the parent, when we can see it that way without judging it, it's like, well, okay, this is information. Obviously, this is a symptom of some sort of sensory overwhelm or dysregulation. Let me now invite my child into these activities that you have that can then maybe guide that child through that overwhelm.
Right.
Yeah. So getting out of that critical thinking, that criticism is so helpful.
Right. And I think when you're right, one of my favorite things to say is all behavior is communication. No
Mm.
matter what you are seeing your child do, it's some level of communication. And so the thing that I think that is challenging is, we have these kind of cultural norms, kind of wider cultural, individual family cultures, the way we were raised, what we were allowed to do, that kind of stuff all playing a role. But then there is also, we also have sensory systems. So when our child is banging on the wall for 10 straight minutes, we our needs may be increasing. We are likely becoming very dysregulated if our child has been crying, whining, hanging from the ceiling fan, running wild through Target, and you can't get them to settle down. So, once we are dysregulated, it's hard to not react from that emotional place too. So I think it's important we all have a sensory system to acknowledge that, so that you can really look at all behavior is
Yeah.
communication, and then you can take steps to help them.
Yeah. Any listener in this podcast knows they're like, yep, 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 because they've been taught that many, many times. In my process that I teach, the Calm Mama process, it's calm, connect, limit, set, correct. And it's calm is all about the parents' emotional regulation. Because as I've been in my practice, I love all the strategies of connection and setting boundaries and following through and, being empathetic and problem solving and all of it. But when I first started teaching all these strategies, people would be like, it's so amazing, but I can't remember. I can't remember to do it. And I was like, what's going on? I realized, oh, because they can't access their own executive functioning and their bank of strategies in order to then put them in play. So yeah, the become a calm mama, the purpose of this podcast in many ways is that emotional regulation. So for our conversation, I think it's good just like, okay, everybody, we know it's hard. And it's like you're going to struggle and you're going to need to be using I think some of these you can use on yourself. That's what I love about the sensory
Yes.
activities.
Yes.
Like calm yourself and then while you're calming yourself, your child will might be attracted to what you're doing or you'll get back online and be able to offer these strategies to your kids. Um, so yeah, it's
Absolutely.
for sure an issue for all of us.
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say about the neurodivergence that, and this is like maybe a rabbit hole, but I really do believe that what we label neurodivergent is based on a society that created a what works best in this environment with time, with school the way we structure it, with the inputs of like you know tech now or whatever, like just a lot like traffic and noise and like whatever our environment, we've created a pretty messy environment that then requires a lot of order as a society to keep it together. So there's a lot of expectations, and time is such a huge issue, and how to behave and how to be in sitting in your seat and be in your body. And I don't think species wise we were really all of us were meant to live this way. Like what we label neurodivergent is actually a very vital and important part of our species that just doesn't quite fit in this society that we've created. I
I
don't know.
completely am tracking you, and it completely makes sense to me. And just again, in my own personal life, my my oldest son is gifted and does I actually just said this week. My middle son has ADHD, and we just had some really major challenges this last week school wise. And a teacher said to me he needs to put in more effort. I was like, oh, we need to talk. It's
He's
like,
working so hard all day
yeah.
long. All he's doing is working so hard.
Like that's not what's going on here. So she got a lesson in executive functioning skills and what was actually the problem. But I said several times this week, I said this system was created for my oldest son and the way his brain works. And it continues to propel and push him forward while it continues to edge out my son that is creative and spontaneous and has all of these other really wonderful gifts.
That we need. We need
Yeah.
as a species, as a culture, as a group. I just, yeah, parents get very overwhelmed when their kid gets an ADHD diagnosis or sensory issues or autism and those kinds of neurodivergent things. They are challenging. I'm not saying they're not, but if we can see the beauty of it and how vital it is, and like that we've created a system that doesn't work for them. It's not that their brain doesn't work. Yeah, it's like it's a mismatch. It's like uh, a missed opportunity to let those types of brains flourish. And that's just the way we've decided to create a society.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because we do see, I mean, there's just some exciting stuff coming out with schools being set up in different ways, like
Ooh,
movement-based schools and different styles of teaching where kids are just excelling in really exciting ways. And the movement can be so key because all of these things really do go together. I know we were talking about just kind of emotions, and I think culturally we tend to think of these things as different. Like we have our emotions over here, we have our sensory needs over here. We have our basic needs like sleep and eating over here, but really these things are also interconnected and play such an important role together. So when a child has sensory sensitivities, uh, or a child has sensory like seeking needs, and it can be a mix in between the two. Some kids are really seeking out certain types of sensory input. Some kids are really avoiding it. But again, the most common thing is I will see a kid that wants to be naked. So they have these sensory sensitivities, but they're also the kids that are hanging from the ceiling fan trying to get as much like proprioceptive and vestibular input, which is like we have three hidden senses that most people don't know anything about that are
ooh,
for.
tell us what they are.
Yeah. So one is proprioception, which is my favorite. It's body awareness. And we have receptors all throughout our joints and our muscles throughout our body. You can't see them, but they are there and they are activated with pressure. So when a child jumps, they're activating that sense. When a child gets a hug, when we get a hug, we're activating that sense. When we lay under a heavy blanket and we snuggle in, we are getting lots of proprioceptive input. It is the only sense baseline that that grounds almost everybody. Like they really can't even point to in research that kids have sensitivities to proprioception. Every other one of the seven senses all can have like kind of these variations with kids being sensitive, seeking, and sometimes not even registering them, which can cause kind of a cascade of challenges throughout their life. So proprioception is one, vestibular is the second. That is deep in our inner ear. And you all are very aware of the vestibular sense if you've ever had motion sickness, car sickness. If you love the thrill of being on a roller coaster, and that stomach dropping feeling, all of that is related to our vestibular sense. It's also deeply connected to our visual sense, hence the car sickness. So when we're moving, our movement is perceived by this fluid swishing around deep in our inner ear and what we're seeing. If those things aren't synced up, we get the car sickness. Very common as we get older, but not common for kids that are young. And it's
That's
important.
why they can spin and spin and spin. Yeah. And like,
Right.
you know,
Many kids can do that. And that can actually be a sign of kids not really registering it. Or yeah, the spinning can get really complicated because
yeah,
sometimes
yeah. But just little kids, they like can do it. Like I'll do it 2 times and I'm like, oh, but yeah, in
right.
general, little kids can spin longer than adults.
Correct. And they should. That's actually helping them process sensory input better. That's why we typically see kids doing these things.
Hmm.
Sensory processing is a building block of all development. When kids are not processing vestibular input correctly, it can actually lead to reading difficulties down the line.
Yeah, yeah, because they're
So
not with the visual tracking and things like
yes.
that isn't getting
Yes.
developed.
It's so important that they're getting this stimulation. And some of these senses, again, if a child has a lot of sensitivity to, it's important in a respectful way to start to help them get used to some of these sensations because in a very kind of methodical, supported way, because some of them just cannot be avoided. You can't avoid not ever getting in a car or experiencing movement. It can cause like a baseline kind of foundational anxiety in a child's life that can, again, just kind of have a ripple effect going across it. So that's something like a lot of OTs do, or I teach in my courses, because those sensitivities can have such a massive impact. Now, the third hidden sense is called interoception. And that is the sense of all of our internal sensations. So it is our emotions because we have palpable feelings in our body from our emotions.
I sometimes say energy and motion, right? Emotion is energy and motion
Right. So you and
inside. Like, yeah, it's you can
this is
feel
going
it.
to vary from person to person. So if maybe you might not be aware of this, anybody listening right now, you might not even be aware of this, but the next time you have a big feeling, you feel really happy, you feel really angry or sad, anxious, stop and think about where you're feeling that in your body. You are feeling it somewhere. Your chest might be getting tighter. You might be feeling lighter if you're very happy or joyful. There are sensations in your body that you are feeling that are actually cueing your brain. I am feeling this way. So that interoception is also responsible for registering if we feel hungry, if we feel full, if we have to use the bathroom, if my belly's hurting, I have an upset stomach, pain anywhere inside of our body. And so you will see variances with kids that have trouble processing these kind of interoceptive feelings. They may not have an awareness of their feelings. Some parents will say they have an incredibly high pain tolerance because they're just not even really recognizing those sensations, or they're super sensitive, like they graze up against the wall and they're crying that hurt.
Hmm.
So those are the three hidden senses. And we really do, within those 8 senses, with the exception of proprioception, we see kids seeking, avoiding, or even not really registering those sensations. And it's very, very common for kids with ADHD and autism. But I have seen tons and tons of kids that have kind of just isolated sensory needs and don't have those diagnoses either. So it's not an indication. They are kind of separate aspects that happen. But when a child's needs aren't being met, like let's say they're trying to avoid something, or like they're wearing the clothes that are so uncomfortable for them, as their dysregulation increases, their brain is only able to handle so much dysregulation before it moves into meltdown mode and they are like fully operating from that amygdala instead of kind of operating within their executive functionings and problem solving. That can even happen for kids that are seekers and aren't able to get their needs met. So when you have a kid that has a lot of proprioceptive and vestibular needs and they need to move to feel regulated and they have to sit in a desk all day, those kids that hold it together and then melt down when they come home,
Yep.
be what's happening. Or they're melting down or lashing out in school because they are unable to regulate their body.
Hmm.
And the same thing can actually, I mean, the same thing happens with emotions because, again, when our emotions get so big and we don't have tools to regulate them, our brain is going right back to that amygdala. And as soon as the amygdala takes over, kids are in fight or flight. And so
Yeah.
now you're going to see all of the emotion, all of the behaviors coming out, which again
Hmm.
are still showing us, hey, there's a problem we need to address here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's information. And if we can, of course, we're very overwhelmed by it, but yeah, if we can see it as information, I think it's really interesting. I don't know, like I remember with one of my boys, as soon as he would go in the swimming pool, he would immediately become dysregulated. And it was like weightlessness without that. I think that proprioception, I don't know if it was overwhelming
Mm.
for him to have water, like to have weightlessness and to be immersed in water or what. But I was just like, once I realized it, we did some exercises before he went in the pool. I set a really strong boundary. You're welcome to be in this pool as long as there's no splashing, whatever. I would pull him out, put him back in, pull him out, put him back in, and just kind of keep re-regulating his nervous system or his, sensory input system. And I don't know if that's anecdotal or if you've seen that. I don't know. I'm just actually curious.
It's actually, I wonder if it had more to do with the splashing. Is this the same son that had clothing sensitivities?
No, it was my ADHD kid. He would just get completely dysregulated. And I'm like, God, what is going on with this kid? As soon as he gets in the water, it's like there's no boundary or something. There's no compression. I couldn't figure it out.
Really interesting because normally swimming is one of the most sensory rich experiences because you're getting proprioception all over your body from the water that's pushing in on you. However, you're also getting lots of tactile input from the splashing, so that can be a challenge. There's also, if there's any vestibular sensitivities, because of that weightlessness and tipping back,
Hmm.
that can feel very scary to kids. Or if they're not able to touch, they can absolutely, or there's like a legitimate fear of just the water. A
Hmm.
child can be getting super dysregulated just because
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's just so interesting because it's like I think it's so helpful to look for patterns in your kid. When are they acting out? What's this trigger? What seems to be the circumstance or the environment or whatever it is, and then kind of problem solving from there, looking for patterns. And like if that's before school or after school or at bedtime, like that's what I was wanting to talk about is when, of course, during a big meltdown, we can talk about that, like how to pull your kid in. But a lot of times it's very challenging because they're kind of like the train has left the station and whatever they're doing to regulate is what they're doing to get back online. Um, but so we could talk about how to handle that. And but I also want to talk about kind of like almost preventive intervention and then like post issue, like how to like get back online after a big meltdown. Because I do notice when we create a regulated environment and we kind of like ground our kids or offer the sensory input or the break from the sensory input, whatever it is that they need before an event or shortly after a hard event, then you don't build up so much of that overwhelm.
right.
And so I wondered if we could talk about like in the middle, how to intervene, but then also it's not preventative. It's more like keeping a shorter account on the sensory input. Like,
Right.
because there's a lot of you put deposit, pause, deposit, but then like how do they release some of it? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So for me, and what I really always teach is understanding what your child's needs are. So, when you're able to kind of, like you said, look for those patterns and know, wow, every time we're in a busy environment, they really start to fall apart. Or school's a really long day for them because they are expected to sit so much for them. Like they are really dysregulated when they come home. And so I'm always thinking of dysregulation as kind of like an old-fashioned mercury thermometer, with that mercury just kind of like going up and down. And that's true for all of us. We all probably have times during the day, or most of us, where we're getting dysregulated at times. Hopefully, we have the tools to help kind of just bring our regulation back down. Often our kids kind of get stuck in that dysregulation and it can just keep growing. If the dysregulation doesn't get dealt with, it's going to grow to that meltdown mode. And like you said, at that point, they're now in fight or flight. That's what, when they're in a full meltdown, they are in fight or flight. There is no reasoning, and anything you're saying to your child is more input that they have to process and is probably going to push them even further. So the prevention is huge, A, in just recognizing the signs of like when your child is starting to get more dysregulated. And B, if you know that there's those challenging times a day, kind of putting those routines in place, like you said, kind of thinking through, wow, my son was so much better at school and he had that kind of dark, cozy time in the morning. Wow, that was so helpful. That really regulated his system to start him off well that day. And so, like you said, that's just a huge sign of what they need. And so there's so much variability in what can be helpful. Again, movement in general is a safe go-to, but as you are trying different types of activities, if you're like, okay, we are going to just try jumping, we're going to do 10 jumping jacks, or we're going to jump on the trampoline, or I'm going to wrap them up like a burrito and we're just going to snuggle on the couch. Testing those things out, checking with the teacher or if your child is old enough to say, like, how does your body feel? How did your day go? What was helpful? And if your child is old enough and has the language, you will be so surprised if you ask your child at the right time, meaning when they're regulated,
Yeah.
what is helpful. They are incredibly insightful. Like,
Mhm.
things that they will come up with, saying, when my son was 4, he was having major separation anxiety going to school. He had a very, very strict teacher, was not able to articulate at the time. I mean, I could clearly see that. And that, she was very strict. And the drop off was brutal. I mean, just brutal,
Mhm.
because I wasn't comfortable with the like just ripping him off of me. But there's this like, this difficult exchange going on, and I'm trying to help him be regulated. We ended up coming up with, I decided after a couple times of that happening, I'm going to bounce him on an exercise ball before we go. So we're going to count, we're going to sing. So there's some connection time between us. Lots of great eye contact. My hands are on his hips. We're bouncing. I'm singing a rhythmic song. Rhythm is so organizing to the brain. So, I'm singing the ants go marching. And I asked him, what else would help you? He doesn't know a thing about sensory. He doesn't know
Mhm.
that word yet. He said, I wish I had something in my pocket that I could squeeze. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this 4-year-old is basically describing a fidget toy to me. So we just made DIY fidget toys. We took latex balloons and filled them with flour and some different textures. He would pick a different one. And this is my ADHD kid who's just the biggest heart. And he wanted me to write, I love you on the balloon with a heart so he could pull it out. So now there's this emotional connection piece for him. There's this sensory component for him. I don't know that I would have thought of that. It was something discreet he could keep in his pocket, but it was giving him proprioceptive input to help him while he was dealing with surges of anxiety. So even though it wasn't a sensory need specifically, I think that this was a lot of anxiety and social separation kind of stuff going on. He's using sensory tools to help calm and regulate his system, which was just
Yeah.
incredible. So between those two things, we were able to get him regulated and get drop off back on track. And we kept up with that for probably months because he needed that support.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and letting him kind of problem solve on his own without being like, here's the list of 5 things. Which one? I mean, you could do that too, but just like, what do you need? And he's like, I want to squeeze something. And yeah, I remember when my son was 5 and he was in preschool or kindergarten. It was not a great environment, similar thing, which strict teacher and all that. And he'd come home out of school and his shirt would just be soaking wet and like filthy. And just from eating it, just from like chewing on it, soaking it, sucking on it, and biting it, and then it being a little boy and it getting really dirty, on the asphalt and stuff. And I just come out, I'm like, what is going on? And I remember asking him, how do you feel when you're at school? Like, how does it feel for you? And I was thinking you'd give me a word, and instead he like squatted down in like a ninja defensive position, and he's like this. And I was like, oh, okay. So between the soaking wet shirt, and like gnawing all day, and this defensive stance, I was like, we're out. I just pulled him.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but you're not going back. And it was like a lot of adventures. That's why I do this job, is because of him. Um, Trying to find the right fit and the right schooling environment and all of that. Um, so, but I loved that it's similar. Like, what does it feel like? And he's just does this like defensive ninja move, and I was like, yeah, bud, that's hard to
Yeah.
feel that tense all the time and be that on
Right.
guard and hyper vigilant. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk strategy a little bit, because I think people are like, but what do you guys do? Um, so you have this really beautiful handout that you give for free on, how to figure out what your kid might need. You go through kind of a like figuring out their own diet, their sensory diet, and kind of what's challenging and trying some things, how to kind of figure it out. And then you have a big list of all sorts of stuff. It's really similar to my Stop Yelling cheat sheet, which is for parents. There's I don't call it sensory diet, but there's a list of things that parents can do when they're overwhelmed,
Mhm.
and activities and things like chew gum or wash your hands or go potty or jump up and down, like stuff like that. And so
Right.
it really reminded me of that. So yeah, give us some go-to, some things to try, and how to use them, how to introduce them. Yeah.
So, yeah, and just to speak to sensory diet, that is such an OT term. And just to be clear, because so many people think that it is about food.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's
It is
a
not.
menu. We'll just use a sensory menu.
Yes, exactly. So it's beautiful. And the idea came from, I think the term was created in the 80s and it was brilliant. It was created by an OT to say, look, like the way that we eat and nourish our bodies throughout the day with food, we also need to do that with sensory activities, sensory supports. Again, whether that's pulling away and taking a break from something, or whether that's getting that movement or those needs in. And so I have a lot of occupational therapists that also follow me. So I use the terminology for them. But you'll almost never hear me say it on Instagram, which is mostly my parenting crowd there, because I think it's just so confusing. And what
It
I,
is confusing for parents, but that's what it
yeah,
is called in the
it
handout. When
is.
when parents from my community get this
Yes, you
handout,
will
it says
see that
that.
it
Yeah.
says that. You will
But
see
it's
that.
not like take out dyes from their diet or whatever, or like decrease sugar. This is more like hang upside down. Like it's like
Right.
ideas
Yeah.
and things that can help your kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Um,
would say an important caveat before if you grab this printable and you're looking at the list and you get really excited about some of these things, which I hope you do, don't get discouraged if you try something like hanging upside down and your kid doesn't want to do it or they don't like it. That is a clue to their sensory needs. So that's why there's kind of a bank of some starter ideas there, because again, if a child has vestibular sensitivities, they are not going to want to hang upside down. Now, is that something to work on for their development? Like you were talking about with the pool, that's kind of a different goal where you're like, yeah, it would probably be good for you to be comfortable with the pool. I don't
yeah.
want you to be scared of water. So we're gonna work on this. We're gonna do short bursts. We're putting up the boundaries, like yes to all of those things. And it's also important to understand that sensory needs fluctuate throughout the day and from day to day, depending on all of the different things that are happening in that moment, because one time you may try this hanging upside down activity, maybe right when they get home from school and their system is overwhelmed, and that is just not feeling good to them. It might not even be that they have a vestibular sensitivity. It just means they might need something else in that moment. So I would also encourage you to not roll anything out and be like, whoa, we tried that hanging upside down and they don't want to do it at all. And I'm never trying it again. So kind of keep these activities as kind of tools in your toolbox as like, I'm going to kind of rotate through these and try them. So hanging out upside down is an awesome one. And there are so many ways that you can do that. You can have your like sit on the couch backwards and just kind of go backwards over the couch. You can do a backward bend if your kid is able to do that. Even like a downward dog position is
Mhm.
simulate, you're getting your head inverted, and that is massive stimulation to the sensory system. Yoga is so calming to us because we are doing tons of sensory input, like as adults. So doing like simple yoga poses with your kids are really awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So any type of movement, upside
Yeah.
down, swinging, also can be really great. I would focus on linear swinging, kind of just like in a smooth arc back and forth. Some kids do love to spin, but it can also excite some kids, and you may be like raising their like arousal level and kind of getting them wilder with spinning. So
Yeah.
I would be wary of that. Of course, taking a cue from your kids. And if you do some spinning in a swing, you know, keep it focused and intentional. Like maybe you're going to count to five while they spin in one direction and then go the other direction also. So
Hmm.
you're stimulating their full vestibular system and not kind of getting them out of balance by just kind of going in one direction. I have seen some of the biggest sensory seekers, including my own son, who like absolutely love swinging, spinning when they have an adult spin them, throw up. So it is very, very possible. My mom was watching me do this with my son. And, I went upstairs to work and she continued to spin him. And she sheepishly came upstairs and said, he just threw up.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to remember that it can make any human dizzy. Like
Yeah,
it's just a
exactly.
true
So
fact. If you spin too much, you might get dizzy and throw up or get like, fall down or
right.
whatever.
So
Yeah.
being very, because even these kids, like my son looked like a kid that could spin for days.
Hmm.
When they're not in control of it and you're becoming part of it, they're not really self-moderating it. So whenever you're doing these activities, if you put your kid on a swing or a scooter board, I love to like get just a rectangle scooter board and have kids push themselves around on their belly. That's fantastic. And I love the engagement in doing it together, but you always kind of want to be checking if you're guiding the movement. You always want to be like pausing and watching their reaction. Like, how are they handling this? And not just kind of like, oh my gosh, that OT on that podcast said spinning was great. And we're
Yeah.
spinning for 10 minutes and now they're sick.
Well,
So
trusting their intuition. Like, if I was going to teach my kid
uh,
to blow bubbles in the water, I'm not going to keep dunking their head in and
right.
yeah, you check in with your human, their person,
Yeah,
yeah, and let
exactly.
them kind of reset for sure. Yeah,
Exactly.
I think I noticed like I wonder if you could think of it in categories like um, compression was helpful for my kids at certain times. And so we did a lot of like sandwiches, we call them. So you'd like put a cushion down and then the kid and then a cushion on top and kind of just gently like bounce. And I'd be like, it's a Sawyer sandwich. It's delicious. And, kind of pushing the top of the cushion down just enough that he could kind of feel it. I'm not jumping on top of him, smashing his body or anything. Just kind of that push, that pressure.
Yeah.
Um, we did like the burrito thing. What we would do is we'd lay a blanket down. He'd lay in it, and then I would just kind of roll him like a rolling pin or something, like just kind of back and forth gently on the carpet, and getting him to like kind of roll onto one side of his body and then roll on the other. Um, yeah, a lot of stuffed animal parties. So like a lot of stuffed animals, big ones. He had a big, huge teddy bear, and he would just roll around, wrestle that a lot, and that always was. I mean, for the most part, very regulating for him. My other one didn't like that as much. He really would feel overwhelmed by compression and kind of
Mhm.
mm, bristle. Um, yeah, I'm just wondering like if there so that parents can think of in the moment ways like, oh, should I try compression or should I try movement? Should, like, what are the, I don't know if you have categories.
Yes. So, I mean, in my mind, categories are always falling under those senses. So, the movement stuff is related to the vestibular. What you're talking about, the compression, is all related to proprioception. Now,
Okay.
any of that compression stuff is also involving the tactile sense. So, for kids that have tactile sensitivities, compression is usually hard. So, kids that are super sensitive to textures, kids that don't like clothing, often do not like being compressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the case, but it can be. So these are my first two go-tos. I am always thinking of movement, and I am thinking of that kind of pressure or compression, and probably the pressure or compression first. And there are lots of kids that do both really well and kind of
Yeah.
want to mix up having one or the other. Others,
My kid that has like real sensory issues, not the ADHD one, it was like there were all of them. Like, there was like a lot of movement, and he really responded well to, well, the 3 R's of regulation, right? Rhythm, relationship, reward. So I'd be like, okay, we're gonna together. I stomp my foot 1, 2, and then he go 1, 2, and then I'd be like, jump up and down, and then I would jump, he would jump, or we jump together, we'd hold hands. So we're like that kind of thing. What you're talking about with the ball, that eye contact, and then especially when the reward part is like the count, like let's do it 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then the brain goes check, like it gets that little. We did it 3 times.
right, and a little
Um,
dopamine boost. Yes.
yeah, just I mean, it's not like a reward like I'll give you a candy if you do your regulation techniques. It's
Right.
more just playing with the thing that the brain likes to finish something.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so if we think about relationship, rhythm, reward, and that rhythm piece is the movement or the compression, whatever that is, the singing.
Right.
I just
And
want I want parents to be able to come up with their own things, as
right.
much as
And
they
it's
can.
like if you're doing compressions or even singing or even swinging, it is, there are so many parents that come to me that have huge sensory seekers and they say, I did these things and they're still like they're wilder and out of
Mhm.
control. And without that rhythm and what you're talking about, the time frame kind of like finish, it's going to be, they kind of need to understand like that again, it helps organize the brain when there is a rhythm that is following because now the executive functioning part of the brain is getting engaged because it's tracking the rhythm and and especially as you were saying, like when you're asking for the repeat, they're kind of having to follow and engage a different part of their brain to be able to do that. So I am always trying to incorporate rhythm, and so if I'm like squeezing a kid, I'm humming, I'm counting, I'm
Mhm.
singing a rhythmic song almost every single time. I also love to like, if you have that big exercise ball, that big yoga ball, you can roll that over your kid like a steamroller,
That's a good one. Yeah.
applying pressure down. Some kids will say more and more. My kid has such deep needs, and he was always kind of a bigger kid that I could roll my body weight on top of the ball. And I would keep my hands kind of, pushed. And again, I'm always watching.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're not going to hurt our children.
right.
Yeah.
If you have like a 2-year-old, if you have a 2-year-old, don't like probably do that with them. But again, you can just apply a lot of a pressure. You can also just take your hands
Hmm.
and you can just squeeze down their arms, slowly giving them really deep pressure. You can do that down their legs. You can do that on their hands, just even their fingers. If you're out in public, you can do wall push-ups, just pushing up against the wall. So you have nothing around you. You can usually find an open space of wall somewhere that they can push up against the wall. And again, you're just counting, doing those wall push-ups. You're standing there, you're counting to 5. Let's do 5 wall push-ups. We're going to count together as we push the wall so hard. Don't
Hmm.
come
Hmm.
down, so you're kind of again bringing in that connection, that silliness. The jumping comes in with that too. So if your kid doesn't want to be touched because they're tactile, Again, jumping is fantastic. One of my favorite things to do that really, again, engages that side of the brain. Kids have to be about 4 or 5 usually to do this. Um, it's called a cross crawl, and you take your hand, you take your right hand and touch it to your left knee. And then you
Oh,
take your right hand and touch it to your left knee while you like bring up your knee at the same time.
hmm.
That's demonstrated on my Instagram account if
Yeah.
anybody wants to like see it. But
And
it's
it's a little bit like, I mean, you think about games we play with little kids. I always think like tell parents like channel your inner preschool teacher, right? Like, what do
yes,
they what do they do? They do Simon Says and they, play
light,
freeze
slow light.
tag
Yes,
and like, stop starts and things like that. Red light, green light. And it really is to kind of put the brain and the body connecting the all of those parts and getting the child to have a little bit more agency over their body and understanding of their body. And that when we just do little tiny things, when they're starting to get like in line, say, or starting to at dinner time, right before you sit down for dinner, or you're going to go in the bath and they get wild and they start throwing water all the time. Like, I think that these are the times to add in a couple of, we'll get in the bathtub once we do our 5 jumps or once, we do our wall push up. I don't know if your thoughts
yeah,
on that, but bringing
absolutely.
those routines, or it doesn't have to be a routine. I don't really, parents get overwhelmed. Just like if you have something that gets nutty, harness, pull back, get the child back engaged in their body enough that they are here in space and time and feel their body. And then they're able to then go to the next thing. I think that's really
Right.
valuable.
Right, absolutely. And transitions are a perfect time to kind of incorporate these because, like you said, you can even do things like we're going to leap like a frog to the shower. And
Yeah.
now you're doing it on your way. They're getting lots of input because what is happens again, when they move into the amygdala or they're stuck in the emotional side of the brain, when we pull in that movement, it's pulling in the executive functioning that allows them to problem solve, to focus on the task at hand instead of their emotions kind of like. And again, I mean, as an adult, this is something like, I mean, I can see and feel happening in my own brain. So I know that if I go outside and just take a 5 minute walk, that I am going to be so much more regulated when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I know that that's not always a solution, but if I'm working, like I know that I need to get up and move because we have to start to engage that part of the brain again. We can really get stuck there. So those transition points are excellent times to kind of be doing those things, carrying something heavy. Maybe they're pushing a laundry basket full of their toys down the hallway. Maybe I my son's kindergarten teacher, my two older children have the most wonderful kindergarten teacher. She talked to me and picked my brain about the sensory stuff all the time. And on the way to circle time, she bought a small mini trampoline, put it in her classroom. And on the way to circle time, everybody jumped 2 times on and then went and sat down in the circle. So motivating for the kids because there was this kind of natural reward built in. I mean, oh my gosh, there's a trampoline in my classroom. And she's giving everybody 2 big jumps on it as they're going. And the kids are waiting turns, standing in line quietly because they're excited to get on that trampoline. And then they're all more regulated and sitting at the circle time, paying attention better. So it was just like brilliant, like little things like that. Like you said, it does not have to be like these complicated routines. It's just kind of like looking for the opportunities to put them in places.
Yeah. Like, do you want to bear crawl or leapfrog? We're going to the bathroom. How do you want to get there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And like engaging the body, engaging the brain and making it fun. And I always promise to parents, like, it sounds like a lot of work, but having a kid run around at Target and not listen and be completely dysregulated and run away, that's a lot of work too. Like dealing with meltdown after meltdown that's really loud and nervous system overwhelm for you, that's hard. That's a lot of work. So I think if they're going to put the work in, let's do it intentionally on the front end or at the end of if your kids constantly get dysregulated right when they get in the car, maybe you don't do carpool line. Maybe you stop and you walk and you stomp 5 times before you get into the car or
Right.
whatever kind of activity to pull them back into the body and your leadership and okay, we're about to get in the car and this is a hard time, or like slowing it down and connecting and moving in a specific way before you then go into like whatever the thing is that's hard. I mean, obviously starting homework is hard. Sitting down for dinner is hard. Cleaning up after the end of the day is hard. Getting into the bath, getting out of the bath. Bedtime is challenging. Getting kids to finish breakfast and get their socks and shoes on. There's
Right.
are natural times that everyone is struggling with
Right.
kids who are overwhelmed or not, sensory disorder or not. So if we can kind of bring them back online with the strategies that you teach, so helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Any last things we're going to ask you to tell us how to find you because everyone needs all of your resources. But do you have anything you want to add?
Just that I know if you are starting to dip your toes into like sensory processing
Mm-hmm.
and hearing that, de just it can feel really overwhelming. Just like any new thing that you're kind of learning. And I would say that just take one little step at a time. There's not something that you have to have a full command of the sensory system and all eight of these senses. But just starting to even have an awareness of it is absolutely huge. And you probably already have instincts about a lot of this stuff more than you might be giving yourself credit for.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Take it chunk by chunk, just a little. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't think you have to figure every single thing out. Trust your intuition and do some of the things that you recommend. Like
Yeah.
follow you on Instagram. You have tons and tons of resources on there. It's really you've built a really beautiful resource for free, just sitting there where they're already hanging out anyway. And there's a lot of noise, parenting noise on Instagram. And um, I find parents feel quite overwhelmed by the multiple voices they listen to on that forum. And a lot of times I'll be like, just stop it. Like, just like, pick two and that's enough. So I'm going to tell people to pick you um, because it really, what you're teaching is so, so valuable. So how do people find you and your website and all that? Tell us.
Yeah, awesome. So on Instagram, I'm at your kids table. And I'm also yourkidstable.com. So it's YOURKIDS table. And we have a full blog with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blog posts too. So if you're not an Instagram user and you want to read, check stuff out, we do have a sensory program, and we also have a membership that teaches a lot of these things too. You can find all of that on our website.
It's so good. I was looking at the website today, Your Kids Table, and I was like, oh, this also could be Your Kid Stable.
Yes, I know.
And I was like, well, that's good too, because it's about picky eating. That's where the primary website came from. But I was like, and also, this helps them be stable.
Yes. It's true. I never thought of it. I always think of like the horse stable. I really wanted it to be the kids table, and the website was taken back in 2012.
Yeah.
But
No, but I was like, oh, yeah,
yeah,
Your Kid's
yes,
Stable. I was
yes,
like, that
I
it's
love it. I love it. I never thought of it that way. I love it.
it goes both ways. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Huge, like kudos to your work and thank you for the resources that you are offering.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah. Hey, Mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies, just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.